Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today is the day. We're going to have a look at my top 10 mass market tarot and oracle decks for 2023. So first of all, I just wanted to say something about this, the way in which I selected the decks and the way in which I'm going to present them in this video. It's got nothing to do with some kind of rank. I'm not ranking them. What happens every time I do this kind of videos, I look at my entire collection, I go through the decks that have been used in 2023 and have been generally also acquired in 2023, although I have to say that is not a must-have sort of criteria for me. If the deck has been used, I have used this so much this year, but perhaps it came out in November last year, it still will be counted towards 2023, simply because all of the decks that I receive in the time between, say, the end of October, November and December of a very specific year, generally speaking, I don't have time to include them in this video, so I will include them in the selection for the year afterwards. So these decks, let's say, either came out in 2023 or at the end of 2022. They could have been previously produced or released as indie decks. I think off the top of my head, at least one of them has. And it's perfectly okay, because when it comes to mass market, then it classifies as a mass market deck. So I am going to stick to that. I'm going to promise to only have a look at mass market decks. The reason why I'm including both tarot and oracle decks is because I use them together. If you watch my channel, you will know that. It is part of my practice. It's something that I really love to do. It's something that brings me a lot of joy, and I also want to share them with equal merit, because I believe that no matter what your practice is, when you do use tarot and oracle together, they have equal merit. Obviously, they are used in different ways, and we can get into that if you want to, but in this case, I'm just really looking for decks that this year blew my mind for one reason or another, and I just could not stop myself from looking at them, gushing over them, using them, recommending them to others, trying to use them in a different way, pairing them up with different decks, whether it was an oracle or a tarot deck. And so those ones really stayed with me and made such an incredible impression in my practice that they made it to the final top 10. If they're in the final top 10, they are absolutely the best. So there is no order in which I'm going to show them to you right now. Let's start. This one is a fantastic deck. It's called the Magicians, Martyrs and Madmen Tarot. It is by Travis McHenry. You probably know Travis from other decks like the Angel Tarot or the Occult Tarot, or even the Hieronymus Bosch Tarot, for example. Travis is also an Egyptian oracle that has been released recently by Rockpool. This is also a Rockpool publication. I think that Travis is very active, and I am not entirely sure 100%, but this deck could have been released as a Kickstarter before it was picked up mass market by Rockpool, or a deck that is very similar to this one. If I'm wrong, apologies. I just have this feeling I do not have that deck, so I cannot vouch for it. But we're going to talk about this deck because this is indeed a mass market release. So the quality of the production is exceptional, so kudos to Rockpool because they're really getting their act together. The two-part box it feels really of high quality. So it's got a really silky kind of texture to it. And also you can see, probably if I do like this, you can see that there is a lot of let's say gold printing, gold foiling on top, but also this kind of really photo-like quality decals on top. And yeah, the inside doesn't really tell us much, but it is very beautiful. Also when it comes to the guidebook. Now, I have to say something about the guidebook. If you watch my channel, you'll know. If you don't, this is the first time that you hear it, but I love guidebooks. I am a big fan of guidebooks. I advocate for tarot readers to actually go back and read the guidebook for each and every tarot deck that they use. Why? Because if it is true that sometimes tarot guidebooks can be little white books and they can have just one sentence per card and it doesn't really tell you much, it is also true that there is the vast majority, at least in my collection, even in mass market decks, that actually have incredibly informative and not to mention beautiful guidebooks, companion books, however we want to call it. It just so happens that in many cases, when there is a very niche-like kind of tarot deck or even an oracle deck, but for an oracle deck it's actually easier to go back to the guidebook because you feel that it's okay for you to go to the guidebook. Whereas if you're an experienced tarot reader, it almost feels as if you should never go to the guidebook because you know all the meanings, don't you? So you're not supposed to read out of the guidebook. And I am so sorry that there has been so much stigma about tarot readers looking through the guidebooks so far. I personally disagree with that stigma. Of course, if it's someone who has no experience and the reason why they go to the guidebook is because they don't know the meaning of the cards, and in that case, of course, they should learn the system first. But if you are a seasoned tarot reader and you just go to the guidebook because you genuinely are interested in the opinion of the creator and the writer of this guidebook, and you want to see the reason behind, you know, the choices of the characters on the cards, then kudos to you, because you're actually enjoying this product a lot more than others who think that they know everything and they don't need to go to the guidebook. So, closing the parenthesis on this, I'm just going to show you how beautiful this guidebook is. What I really appreciate about this is that for each and every card we have the name, of course we have the title of the card, but we also have the name of the person who is depicted on the card. We have a little bit of a story behind it, and then finally we get to the meaning of the card itself. But it's not your general meaning, because every now and then, not for all of the cards, but the majority of the cards actually refer back to the figure represented. So if the Six of Cups talks about Nicolas Flamel, for example, you will have the meaning of the Six of Cups related to the reason why Nicolas Flamel has been chosen for this card in specific. So, for example, it says the Six of Cups is a card of collective memories and remembering things from the past. Flamel is pictured on the card surrounded by the glasses and vials he used for his experiments, and he is holding the final formula for immortality. Happiness brought by remembering times past and nostalgic feelings make this card pleasant, but also bittersweet, for these are things that are not in the present. Flamel's eternal life meant he would outlive all his loved ones, and his success as an alchemist meant he had nothing more to learn and no more experiments to undertake, which had been his main joy in life. How bittersweet is that? How profound this meaning is, and how beautiful it is that we are presented with this card. How much more knowledgeable can we get by reading the guidebook and knowing this bit about Nicolas Flamel and thinking about him? Of course, everyone knows him because it was mentioned in Harry Potter, and if you have been studying alchemy, of course you remember studying about Nicolas Flamel. However, we probably did not pay attention to this, did we? And we probably did not associate Nicolas Flamel to the Six of Cups. And yet, this is a very important way to bond with your deck. Because the next time that I will see a Six of Cups, whether it's in this deck or another deck, I will remember about Nicolas Flamel and his feelings. So, having said that about the guidebook, and I promise I won't be spending this much time for the guidebook of each and every deck that we're going to go through. But let me just show you this deck. This deck has an incredibly interesting feel of almost curated Renaissance type of art, but then again it's also done in many cases with a little bit of flair. It is very interesting. I have the feeling that there was a lot of participation from the creator in the images, whether it is indeed curated art or not. For example, this is a very famous image of Grigory Rasputin. It has been depicted in many cases like this, you know, with the blessing gesture of the hand. But it feels almost as if Travis actually went over the image and just changed a couple of things to make it proper, or to make it his own. Jack the Ripper for death, for example. This is a very common image of Jack the Ripper as well, but it is reinterpreted somehow in a different way. The reason why this deck is amongst the top 10 is because the stories behind these characters are most of the time very touching, very moving. All of them have a spot-on reason to be representing the card they represent. And it definitely enriched your cultural background to know about all of these characters. In many cases, it also gave me the possibility to think about the story behind the cards and also make associations, as I said before, in such a way that the next card I was pulling, the next time I was pulling that card, I was actually thinking about the stories of these characters. I really like it when a tarot deck gives me something else. It's, for me, deciding if I love a deck or not, especially when I'm going through all of my decks, and I'm talking about more or less 420 decks now. I've done a little bit of culling in the last couple of weeks. So when I go through 420 odd decks, it is very difficult to decide, even though I asked myself to focus on the ones that I have been using in 2023, or that actually enter my collection in 2023, it is still rather difficult. And so one of the reasons why I actually really enjoy doing this and filming this video is because it makes me look at my decks in a different way. I hope it makes sense. In any case, it is a very interesting thing to do. You should not feel guilty about, for example, setting aside a few decks because they just didn't resonate with you. Or you shouldn't also feel guilty about saying that this is number 1, this is number 2, etc. Ranking them, there's nothing wrong about doing that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because these are the decks that are part of your collection. You are the one that chose them. One of the many reasons why I chose this deck when I chose it the first time when I bought it, and then I chose it again to be part of my top 10, is because basically I feel like I'm really connecting with this deck. It resonates so much and it gives me so much. It's really one of those symbiotic relationships where I don't only just use a deck because I need to pull a couple of cards, I need to do a divination, I need to read for a client, I need to do a tarot and oracle pairings, I need to take a few photos for Instagram or take a video for YouTube. This has been chosen because it really bonded with me. And the reason why it bonded with me in some cases is personal, in some other cases I have absolutely no problem in sharing that. And it is because, in this case, because the stories are so moving. Each and every one of these stories will touch your heart. I highly recommend this deck, and it's one of my top 10. And the next deck I want to talk about is the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess, or Burgess. Sorry, I think every time I pronounce this name, I never know whether I should pronounce it the French way or the English way, but in any case, this is the creator of this deck. This is one example in which this deck entered my collection in 2023. I think the release was indeed the mass market in 2023. However, this deck was released before 2023 as a indie deck. This one, however, is the mass market publication, and it is by Hay House. So it's got the typical, product value of Hay House. Also very typical when it comes to the guidebook. However, I will just show you briefly. I never want to break the spine of, well, pretty much any book, but in particular when it's a book like this, I really try carefully to open the pages like this. There is no thumbprint or image of the cards, but it's not necessary. We have the cards themselves. I like the fact that there is a little bit of description on the cards. Even when it comes to the minors, there is something that you don't see in every deck. Sometimes the minors have just one line, whereas the author of the guidebook specifically, let's say, spends more time on the description of the majors. I really like this deck, but the reason why it's in my top 10 is because of the pips. I know, right? Why should that be so? Well, first of all, if you're not familiar with the term, this is a pip deck. So this is, let's say, a pipish deck, and let me make a distinction. A pip deck, your typical pip deck, is a Marseille. So the Tarot de Marseille, when we look at the minors, they don't necessarily have any kind of representation other than, for example, if it's the 8 of Swords, you will have 8 swords, and that's it. That's your typical pip deck. And at the other extreme of the spectrum, you have the fully scenic, fully illustrated and fully scenic deck, and we talk about, for example, your RWS, where the 8 of Swords is a person surrounded by 8 swords and blindfolded and also with their hands tied at the back. So that would be a fully scenic, fully illustrated minor. And your way in between is when a deck is not necessarily just showing you 8 swords, but it's also not showing you a person surrounded by the swords or any other scene that will, let's say, remind you of the meaning of the 8 of Swords. Because it doesn't need to be an RWS or an RWS clone in order to be fully scenic. This is the way in between, and that's why we call it pip-ish, because it's not a pip. It does have more illustration rather than a pip, but it's not fully scenic. So when it comes to pip decks, I don't like it when an RWS, or let's say a deck that is based on the RWS system, is showing you pips. Because in that case, it almost feels like it's a marketing operation. It feels like it's a money grab operation. So they show you most of the time when they're advertising the deck, they only show you the majors, and the majors are absolutely fantastic. And then when you get the deck, you see that the minors are really lazy pips. That to me is almost offensive. At least show me the minors, because I can have, I can have reservations on buying a deck like that, and perhaps I don't like it, perhaps I don't want it. I don't want to be tricked. If I do like it, if I do want it and I buy it, at least I would have done that with the knowledge that the minors are pips. This deck is pipish, but it's a really good choice for pips. Every time we have a card like this, I actually admire the card. And it is an 8 of Swords, of course, but it's so beautiful because you have the scissors. So you have, let's say, the swords represented by the scissors in this case, but you also have this ribbon-like banner, and it's just going around every single one of the scissors. And there is one at the top which is actually in the act of cutting through the ribbon in such a way that once this will be cut, then you will have all of the other scissors free. This is a fantastic way to represent the 8 of Swords, and I can assure you that I do have some RWS clone fully scenic decks that are not as beautiful as this one. So that's the main reason why, to me, this is one of my top 10, because not just the majors are beautiful, but the minors may possibly be my favorite pipish minors ever. 6 of Pentacles, for example, the 3 of Cups. It is the way in which there is a suggestion of the meaning of the RWS in these pips that really, to me, is really, really beautiful. I honestly have not seen any other deck that does that in such a skilled way. And so I'm here to celebrate skill. And I'm also very grateful that it's such an amazing deck by itself. For example, I love the diversity. I also love that there is this person, for example, that is missing a leg, has a titanium leg, a prosthetic leg, but they're actually going on an adventure because, I mean, look at the backpack, that must be quite heavy on top of everything. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. I personally, my mom was in a wheelchair for most of her life, was at least most of my life. And it was back in the days in which having a wheelchair was, you know, being doomed because you were condemned to stay at home. But nowadays you can see that even though there are still barriers, there's less and less. And there's a lot more than people on a wheelchair can do. And so I really do appreciate that because, you know, it shows you that you can still live your life to the best of your possibilities. And that's one of the things that I'm grateful for to this deck, because it's showing you that possibility. But of course, there's so many other reasons why I like this deck. I also like the color palette, for example. I even like the font. So I like using it. When I use it, it's a very straight shooter. It really hits the spot when it comes to, let's say, so below kind of readings as opposed to as above kind of readings. This deck is definitely for the daily kind of energies, not necessarily for the big cosmic energies. And it's not, being pippish like that means that it's not necessarily an archetypal deck, even though when it comes to the court cards, they have really good archetypal representation of the court cards. So this is one of my top 10, and it's the 5th Spirit Tarot. And the next deck is an oracle deck, because I want to show you that, as I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not just focusing on tarot decks, I'm actually showing you oracle decks as well. This is called the Human Spirit Oracle, Learning to Reconnect, and it's by Jenna Della Grottaglia. This is a Rockpool publication, and indeed it came out this year. This deck, of course, you will be familiar with it, but most of you, I reckon, will be familiar with the guidebook as well, because being an oracle, there is no stigma in using the guidebook when it comes to an oracle deck now, is there? What I do appreciate about this guidebook is that there is an actual conversation going on when you read the meaning of the cards. It's almost as if the creator was addressing you, because it's always using the second person. So ahoy there, you at the helm of your ship, choosing a course and making the choices, and so on. So it's actually very interesting, because it's almost as if it were an invitation to participate to the meaning of the card itself. When it comes to, let's say, the product value, this is a Rockpool deck, but it's not, let's say Rockpool has done some improvement in their in the value of their products. I'm not entirely happy about this gilding. So if you're familiar with this type of gilding, it will not only chip very easily, but this is the kind of very sharp kind of edges that will kind of scratch your fingers when you use it. I do, however, like the color. It's one of my favorite greens anyway. These are the backs, very nice, and they are reversible, because if you notice on the guidebook, there's actually a meaning for the cards also when they are reversed. I don't read reversals on Oracle. So, but in case you do, that's a good possibility to have. Now, this deck is very whimsical, and I have to say, when I first got it, I asked myself if I was ever going to resonate with it. Then I started using it, and oh my god. Let me tell you, this deck will mock you, will make fun of you, it will laugh together with you, but sometimes it feels like it's laughing at you. You know what I mean? but it's one of those decks that has such a strong personality that honestly I like interacting with it. And it's a full personality. It's not just, let's say, when you use an oracle deck, you tend to think that an oracle deck will be used for a certain type of light work as opposed to shadow work. No, this deck can actually be used for pretty much anything you want to use it for. And it will always just tell you the truth, spill the tea, indeed, in the most direct way possible, which is very unusual for an oracle deck, because let me tell you, most oracle decks will always tell you that everything is pink and golden and wonderful, and here, have a hug on me, and here, here's some hearts. And this deck is not like that. This deck will really not, it's not pulling any punches. It's literally just saying, this is what you need to hear, and whether you like it or not, that is not my problem, but this is really what you need to hear. And I love it for it, because it's interesting, because there is a participation, because I actually like a little bit of pepper in my decks. And even though I have a lot of peppery tarot decks, you know, when it happens for an oracle deck, I'm actually happy about that. I love this card. Am I blue? I've been pulling this card so many times this year, and I love the fact that it's not just telling you that you're blue, it's asking you, am I blue? It's different. I don't know if you feel the difference, but it's really engaging. It's not just telling you that you feel in a certain way, which is something that many decks tend to do. This one is actually asking you to ponder on something, to think about something. And some of the cards are really whimsical. So I really enjoy using this deck. This year it's been one of my favorite oracle decks, and when I was going through all of my decks and choosing the top 10 mass market, I had to pick this one up because I really enjoy it. So this is the Human Spirit Oracle. So going back into tarot, I just wanted to show you that sometimes, even if a deck is not in your own language, it is still very interesting. Now, I have to say that this one is indeed in Italian, which ironically is my own language because I am Italian. But what I meant by showing you this is that in many cases, thanks to today's technology, we can actually use, for example, I have an iPhone. And the only thing I need to do whenever I want to translate something is to use my camera lens from the iPhone and just point at, for example, some writing, and then there's a couple of options. One of them is to select a text, and as soon as you select a text, you also have the opportunity to translate it thanks when you have installed a certain app, and I think it's Google Translate. I could be wrong, but I think it is. So the reason why I wanted you to look at this deck is, first of all, I love Japanese lore. I love yokais. I absolutely, well, I studied Japanese for many years, and I feel very close to the Japanese culture. I love Japan. I've been there 4 times. I have a really close Japanese friend that I always pester her with questions about everything related to culture and food and movies and books and comics and everything. And so, for example, one of my favorite indie decks will be the Yokai Yochi Tarot by Bubo Blake, but that's an indie deck. And it also came into my collection probably 3 years ago or something like that. So that it wouldn't qualify for this video. Otherwise, you could be assured that I would have shown you that. So I'm showing you this deck because it's called Tarocchi Yokai, so the Yokai Tarot. This is the Italian version. There's also a French version. Just a reminder, I will put, for each and every one of these decks, I will put a link in the description box below, just in case you want to have a look at them or you want to purchase them. So this deck is readily available from, I think, both Amazon France and Amazon Italy. Maybe also Amazon US, but I'm not entirely sure. I did get it from Amazon Italy. The guidebook is fantastic. It's very informative, not just about the, let's say, the specific yokai. Sorry, I forgot to mention that yokai is a Japanese supernatural being, part of legend, part of myth. So for each and every one of these cards, we have the yokai, we have the Japanese kanji and hiragana and katakana. Well, there's probably just hiragana, not katakana, if I'm correct. But in any case, this one is the way in which you will read this name, Nyobo, and it's the Knight of Cups. Then you have a little bit of a description of this specific yokai. So what is the Myobo? And it's the spirit of the celestial fox. And it's got a white candid fur, and it's got a really fluffy tail. It tells you that it's a guardian spirit, and it's also a messenger of good fortune and blessing from the gods. So this is a bit of an explanation on the specific yokai, as I said, and then it goes into the description of the card itself. So we talk about the Knight of Cups, what the properties of the Knight of Cups are, what it is as an archetype, and the meaning of the card. When it comes, for example, to the upright meaning, the reverse meaning, with a few keywords each. I love the simplicity and the elegance of this guidebook. It's very to the point, and you don't necessarily need more than that, but it is very good to have the possibility to look at it. It does also have the same amount of length of description, whether it's a major arcana or a minor arcana. And it does give you a possibility to look at a couple of spreads. Now, the deck itself, I have to say, when it comes to the production value, it is rather disappointing. I had to say that just in case you want to purchase this deck, you need to know this. It's one of the worst cardstock I've ever seen. It is not an expensive deck, so of course you pay for what you get, but I pay for less, I pay less for other decks, and to be honest, their qualities were a lot better than this one. I don't understand why they did it this way, and this is the Italian version, so perhaps the French version has a better quality, I don't know. What I have to say is that it is very flimsy. It feels like it's just two pieces of paper stuck together and laminated. That is literally what the feeling of this deck would be. So much so that it's actually transparent. Obviously you can't see it now because I don't have a backlit, let's say, screen here. But I can assure you, if you take this card, you put it against a window and there is, let's say, sun outside, you will see the drawings on the backs. So it is a pity. And let's say being a cardstock fanatic made it so that I really doubted whether I wanted to show you this deck in specific as part of my top 10. However, my love for this deck goes beyond the cardstock, even though every time I have to remind myself not to get nervous about the cardstock because it really drives me insane. I am not a fan of the size, let's say, because it's got the same width of a normal tarot size, but it's a lot taller, which makes it very difficult for my small hands to actually shuffle this deck. But that's okay. These are small details because when it comes to the deck, it's an absolute wonder. It's gorgeous. The art style is amazing. The choice of the yokais are perfect. Even if you don't know much about yokais, when you read the guidebook, you will see that it's really spot on with the meaning of the cards. I love the color palette. I love the way in which, there's also a conscious decision to represent these figures in a certain way and give them, for example, a very specific facial expression to also add a layer to the meaning of the card itself. It's not just the legend, you understand what I mean? It's also the way in which the creator, the illustrator, has decided to reproduce these cards. I love this 9 of coins, super cute. So this is one of my top 10. It's fantastic. It pairs up in a wonderful way with a French oracle deck which is called Oracle de Kami et Yokai, in which, as you can imagine, there are representations of Kami. Kami is the word for spirit in Japanese, and Yokai, which is a supernatural being. It pairs up really well with that deck. It's got the same size. It's got also pretty much the same color palette. However, the cardstock is very different. So the Oracle de Kami et Yokai has a really good cardstock. This one is not. But that's the last dive that I would say. That look at this world card, isn't it absolutely wonderful? I really love the sense of those ukiyo-e, which is the art of Japanese woodblock printing. They have this kind of, they achieve this sense of depth of field with the fog. Or sometimes if there's water elements, for example, there will be birds, for example, at different levels. I really enjoy this deck. I enjoy looking at the cards. I enjoy reading about the yokais represented. And this may very well open a rabbit hole because of course you will want to know more about these legends and the supernatural beings. And it is so very interesting. I really love using this deck. And the reason why it is part of my top 10 indeed is because it's not just about the cards for this deck, it's about a whole universe that is presented to you. So this is the Taroki Yokai or Yokai Tarot. And the next tarot deck is a relatively recent acquisition in my collection, but I love it so much that I actually decided to include it in this video. Normally speaking, as I said before, something that has joined my collection in the month of November and December will be considered for the next year, the following year. However, I have seen this deck throughout many social media platforms. I've seen it in many YouTube channels, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Discord. And I loved this deck even before I actually received it. So it has a little bit of a story because this deck I acquired it during the Black Friday sale, but what happened was that it got stuck in a depot somewhere. Actually got stuck at customs here in Sydney. It came from the US. And for some reason it got stuck there and I was asked to provide further details, but I wasn't told who to provide the details to. So I even tried to contact customs to ask if I could get in touch with someone who could help. They had no idea what was I talking about, and then I couldn't really contact Amazon. It's not the easiest thing, let's say, to get in touch with customer service on Amazon Australia. I love the fact that they have next day delivery. Absolutely, it's fantastic, but sometimes it's a bit frustrating not being able to talk to someone when something like that happened. So at a certain point I just saw an update on the status of the deck and it said that it hadn't been shipped yet, and I was like, how could it be stuck in customs in Sydney coming from the US if it hasn't been shipped yet? So obviously it was an error in the algorithm. But that made it so that I couldn't even, let's say, the tracking number disappeared, so it was really odd. And it wasn't even Mercury retrograde yet, so I don't know what happened there. Perhaps because Mercury retrograde in this particular time of the year is very hard on air signs, specifically on Aquarius, which is me, I think that I started feeling the retrograde even 3-4 weeks ago. Anyway. So what happened was that one day I had to buy something else from Amazon Australia, placed the order, and the day after, the thing that I ordered arrived together with this deck. And so, you know, it's absolutely wonderful. I was so stoked to finally having the possibility to have a look at it, because everyone has talked about this deck in such a superlative way that I was really curious. Now, I talked about this deck a couple of times before in my channel. I have to say that every time I start by saying that there is one card which is particularly triggering for me, and it's the Empress card because she's wearing a mask, and being reminded of the pandemic is not, it's very unpleasant to me for a lot of things that happened to me in specific during the pandemic. So I was very hesitant, but this deck when I started using it, when I started going through it, when I started pairing it with, by the way, the Magical Spirit Oracle, which is a perfect pair. And by the way, if you haven't watched my video, I posted a couple of days ago a video on the best tarot and oracle pairs of 2023. I urge you to watch that video because it's so much fun. I had so much fun filming it, and I hope it's fun for you to watch it as well. There's so many decks there because I've been cheating it, and it's not just 10, it's like 20-30 decks. So this is an incredible addition to my collection because in many cases I've heard people saying that they were put off by the fact that the characters depicted in the cards are very young, and so it is difficult if you're not at this age, if you're not in your 20s, it's difficult to identify with them. However, I have to say, I don't necessarily mind that. I would have, for sure, in different decks, and as a matter of fact, I have been known for rehoming different decks because I did not resonate with the characters. Well, this is, for example, this is an older person, so obviously there is, but I guess it's just one or two. To be honest with you, 99% of the characters are really young. There is, however, diversity when it comes to skin tone, ability, gender. This is the Empress card that I was talking about. But it is not something that is very heavy. It's not something that will put me off. And on top of everything, let me tell you, the images on the cards are so spot on, and they're so very powerful, intense and deep in their meanings and their association with the card they represent. And on top of that, it would be enough, but on top of that you also have sentences, messages at the bottom of the card, which are absolutely incredible. Incredible. Many times you will see that there are questions. You could use them, for example, as journaling prompts or for meditation in your practice. There's a lot of ways that you can use this deck. I just really love it. I enjoy spending time with it. The Nine of Swords is 3 a.m. If you watch my channel, you will know how many times I keep on repeating the same thing when I come to the Nine of Swords. It's the anxiety of losing control over things, of feeling that you don't have control over things. But on top of everything, it is the 3 a.m. waking up, because 3 a.m. is the time of night where you're completely by yourself. Yes, you could be sleeping with your partner, but at 3 a.m. chances are, well, my husband is never awake at 3 a.m. He's really a good sleeper, lucky him. I'm a bad sleeper. And 3 a.m. is just become almost, you know, almost an acquaintance. You know, every now and then I'm like, there you go again, 3 a.m. It's just a time of the night in which you feel completely alone, and everything that you can handle during the day feels almost as if it was really a catastrophe. You cannot deal with that because everything looks much more gloomier than what it actually is. Or you are reminded of things that really make you sad or worried or anxious. So I really enjoy, and the Devil card is toxic, which is, how cool is that? It's the toxicity of an environment you are surrounded by. You are part of this environment, but you feel that you don't belong. And that's a wonderful way to look at the Devil card. The way in which some of these cards are represented is absolutely genius. It's brilliant. It's brilliant when it comes to the color palette. I really love it. It's brilliant when it comes to the sentences at the bottom, as I was saying. I absolutely love using this deck, and I felt, again, when I was going through my collection, I really felt like I had to talk about this deck, because there might be someone out there that is not like me, has got doubts about perhaps the fact that all of these characters are very young. And they fear that they might not resonate with this deck. I can assure you 1000% I could be their mom. Okay, I could definitely be their mom, but I still use this deck. I do not mind that at all. It's just a wonderful deck. So this is the Cozy Witch Tarot deck. And let's have a look at another oracle deck that I really enjoy. This is the Signs of the Times Oracle by Crystal Benna. This is a Hay House release from 2023. It's a fantastic oracle deck. I was this close to choose this deck for an underdog video that I did. So my underdog decks, in the sense that I believe that there are decks that are really not receiving the attention and love that they deserve, and this is certainly one of them. But perhaps I actually did mention this deck. I honestly don't remember. It was a couple of months ago. But what I wanted to say about this deck is that please don't judge it by its cover, because I know that this could be very appealing to some people, but I also know, and I've heard of a lot of people saying that they think it's just one of those oracle decks. And when I hear people saying it's just one of those oracle decks, it means that they have plenty of them already. They don't necessarily need this one on top of the ones they already have in their collection, and then in this case they don't reach out for it even when they do get it. This is super affordable, first of all. Second of all, it's a really good product value. I mean, it is a Hay House, so you have, as I was saying before, all their usual stuff that comes with the deck. So of course you will have the guidebook with the description of the card, a small thumbprint. It's in black and white, but we don't need it to be in color. And then you also have a couple of sentences when it comes to the additional meanings. But what I love about this deck is it's just so practical. It's incredible. The connection that you form with this deck is beyond many connections that I try, and the effort that I put on trying to bond with other decks. This one was so easy, it was just meant to be. The way in which you relate back by looking at the image on the card and the keyword, the title and the keyword, is just really simple, but also very spot on. It's just really direct. It's very helpful whenever you're reading and there is, for example, a meaning that is eluding you and you just need to pull an additional couple of cards because you want to make sense of the cards in front of you. This one is what I use. This one is what I recommend. It's gorgeous, but it's also really simple. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. Sometimes you need simple. There's no two ways around that. I don't know about you, but I read every day, either for myself or for my practice or for my clients. I handle decks, I read them, I look at the images, I read the titles, I read the guidebooks, I read the keywords, I read the numbers, I read everything about a deck every single day. Sometimes I don't want to have to focus too much on the card to understand what it's talking about, to understand what the message is. Because especially when you're reading for a client, let's not forget that tarot readers are storytellers. They become storytellers. We need to be translators. We need to know a different language. We need to understand it. We need to get the message, translate it in our head, and present it in such a way to the person we're reading for that they understand what the message is. Because we are the medium between the messages that is coming out of the cards and the way in which the person is perceiving it. If we don't explain ourselves, the person will not understand what the message is. So the cards can be fantastic, but if we have the priority of understanding what the message is. If we don't get it, no one else will, because guess what? When you don't understand something, trying explaining it is just making a mess. So I love that this deck is so simple. I wanted to praise it and I wanted to gift it with the fact that it's in my top 10 mass market decks. This is the Signs of the Times Oracle. And the next deck is my favorite, the Tarot Landscapes, edited by Francesca Matteoni, illustrations by Yoshimari. The publisher is Vivida. This publisher has also published something else. To be honest with you, I thought about it the other day because I was watching a video about, I was watching Lisa's hot takes video about a new upcoming deck. And I thought to myself, oh, it's Vivida, it's by Vivida, so I'm definitely interested because I really love the product value, first and foremost, but also think that they made a really bold choice in producing this deck. And I'm just gonna show you. I talk about this deck all the time. If you watch my channel, you're probably bored because you've seen this deck a few times and you've heard me gushing about it and you know that I love it, and so for you it's probably okay, let's skip to the next deck, which is totally fine. But if you haven't seen this deck, let me just tell you, this deck will take you in a wonderful adventure. It will make you cry, it will make you laugh. If you listen to this deck, if you actually open your mind to understand the message on these cards, and if you look with curiosity and interest at the images on the cards, I can assure you 100% that it will be a very heartwarming experience. It is an absolute joy to use, and on top of everything, it was a present for me from one of my closest tarot friends. It's just, it ticks all the boxes. This deck is gorgeous. So let me just explain an additional couple of things about the choice of the images in this deck. By the way, the guidebook is fantastic, because this deck is, it has a concept, let's say. It has been born out of a premise that is very interesting. So these are all places that are known to Francesca, whether because she's been there or because she's heard about them or because someone close to her has been there and they told her a story. So each and every one of this card is actually representing a real place or something that has actually happened, whether it's happened to her or it's happened to someone close to her. It's actually true. These images that could be just as well be photographs. They are amazing. I don't know, it's obviously something that you need to feel for yourself. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tell you that this deck brings a lot of emotions to the surface. So I personally find it very helpful when I want to use it for inner child healing. This is a really interesting deck to use in such an environment. And the stories that you can read about in the guidebook are very conducive of a certain type of conversation. So when you use it, for example, as I said, for your inner child healing practice, you will see that you will be called upon to be very engaged with the images as well. It will tap into not just your intuition, but also in many cases, your memories as well. So when at least my way of doing inner child healing work is also to try and get in touch with the memories that correspond to my inner child, not just the feelings of my inner child. Because most of the time, when there's a feeling, where there's a feeling, there's also a memory attached to that. So if we let go of those memories without actually processing them, the healing will never be complete. You can have the best intentions in doing your practice in a certain way, but if you don't do it the right way, I'm afraid there might be some things that are not actually processed, not actually healed. So when you tackle that image, because it triggers that specific memory, and you tackle that memory and you process that memory, that's the right way to heal, or at least that's a step forward. That is the one step forward that is probably the most difficult one to take, because it is the first one. So I'm incredibly grateful to the person that gifted me this deck, because I love it so much. I use it with the Welbeck decks. So if you're familiar with my channel, I use the Welbeck decks a lot. The Welbeck decks are, for example, the Sea Soul Journey Oracle cards, the Earth Blessings Oracle cards, and the Sky Wisdom Oracle cards. And they represent 3 out of the 4 alchemical elements. So I can't wait for Welbeck to publish the Fiery deck. This Judgment card is wonderful. I love the fact that we have the Northern Lights. I have seen the Northern Lights in Iceland and in Arctic Norway, and it was the most amazing experience I've ever had. It was so emotional. It was also very, let's say, trying, demanding of us, because it was -20, I think it was -22 degrees Celsius, so it was freezing cold. And you know, in order to get there, of course, you have to travel a lot, and there's a certain cost associated to that as well. So it's not something that you just, you know, pay $5 to see. But it was so worth it. And I have such intense memories of when I was seeing the Northern Lights, in specific when I was above the Arctic Circle. I remember that night when one of the 3-4 nights in which we saw them, they were actually dancing in the sky. And we've been told by our Sami leader, we were staying at the Sami village. So our Sami leader told us that it was so very rare, and that he himself, who lives there and does that for a job, like he takes people out hiking in the woods to catch the Northern Lights, and he said that he hadn't seen something like that in years. And so we were so lucky to witness that. It was an amazing experience. I highly recommend it. So it's 600 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle in Arctic Norway. So this is an amazing deck. As I said, it's one of those decks that I find different ways to use it, and therefore different ways to bond with the cards. But it's always making me very emotional, but it's a good kind of emotional. And that's why I use it for Inner Child, because it is an incredibly safe space where it's okay to get emotional, because when you're looking at an image and that represents perhaps a trigger, you have the right to feel emotional. As a matter of fact, it's a release. It's a release of all the bad things that are stuck into our body. So this is the Tarot Landscapes, and it's definitely one of my top 10 mass market decks for this year. And let's have a look at another Oracle deck. Now this is here because, let's say, I wanted to give a shout out to Rockpool because they changed the way in which they produce these Seasons of the Witch oracles, and this was the first one that was showing that change. So there was a change in the artist, but I love the previous editions, so I really love the previous artist productions as well. What I do appreciate, and I'm so very grateful that they did that, was that they changed the sentence at the bottom. It used to be, if you're familiar, for example, with the Samhain edition of this Oracle deck, it used to be a sentence that was almost like lyrics, almost like a poem. And the problem with that is that there's a lot of people that don't have English as a primary language. And in my case, for example, it's not my primary language. And so when I was reading those sentences, I had to really focus on the meaning. I probably had to read them a couple of times in order to be able to understand what the message was, what was it referring to. And one of the consequences of that was that I was actually lifted off from the reading. So I was kind of distracted from the images on the card or the keyword, for example. I know for a fact that I've been told, every time that I say this, I've been told by other people that they also appreciate the fact that we went from a poem-like sentence to an actual just simple message. So it wasn't just non-English speakers or non-English natives that were noticing that, but there's a lot of English speakers or natives that felt the same way as I did. And it's just one of those decks. It's so beautiful. I also have In Bulk, and it's the same authors when it comes to the illustrations as well. They look absolutely gorgeous. I really love them. And I'm collecting all of them, so I know that there's going to be a couple of releases next year. I think Lita and Ostara. I think so, yeah. So we're currently at number 5. In bulk was number 5, so we have an additional 2. So obviously we're missing 1 of the Sabbats, but it's so very interesting also using them together. I use them together when I do a Wheel of the Year reading, for example, or what I call the continuity spread, which is a type of work that I'm doing with my members. So if you're not familiar with my membership, I have 3 tiers of membership. The first one is a supportive one, the second one is the Sunlight members, and the top tier is the Starlight members. With the Sunlight members, I'm going to do this kind of work in which we're doing lots of things, and it's lots and lots of fun. I do sneak previews of unboxing videos. I also do a early access of all of the decks that I want to rehome on a monthly level. I do at least 1 monthly reading for each and every member, and I also do a sort of let's say a read like a pro, I call it. It's a bit of a course of reading tarot, but I go into a more intermediate to advanced kind of level, so it's not a beginner's course at all. But we're looking, for example, right now we're doing a very deep dive course into the alchemy of each and every cards in the major arcana. And so there's lots of fun when it comes to that. The top tier is the Starlight members, and with the Starlight members we do all of the above that I've just said, but I also include a very specific tailor per person work on healing from trauma and grief. So we do a lot of healing, a lot of processing through tarot, and that is tailored per each and every person. And by the way, until the end of January, if you subscribe to my membership from the Sunlight up, so from the second tier up, you're going to receive a complimentary reading for the Wheel of the Year 2024 from me. And last but not least, I also can read in 4 different languages. So if you want, I can read in Italian, English, Spanish, and French. So, and I hope that, you know, if that's not something that will want to make you be part of my family, then let me know if there's anything else that you would want. I'm always very flexible, and I can include other perks if you want. So going back to this deck, it's so very beautiful, and the continuity spread is something that I'm doing with my Sunlight and Starlight members, in which I literally just use all of these oracle decks. And each and every one of them has got a very specific approach to your practice, to my practice, and so it's a very beautiful way to establish, for example, a reading for the year ahead, because it's a little bit of magic, it's a little bit of witchery, it's a little bit of traditions related to the contact that we have with nature. And it's a lot of fun. But this one is in my top 10 because it's a symbol for all of the Season of the Witch oracles that Rockpool has been publishing in the last 2-3 years. I'm very, very happy that they decided to take this stylistic choice, because it's been very welcome in the tarot community. And this deck in specific is my favorite. The Mabon one is my favorite, even though in bulk is pretty cool too. And the next deck is a tarot deck again, so we're almost at the end, although I have to say, just as a bit of a disclaimer, I always cheat, so when I say it's 10, it's actually 11. You need to expect that from me. Each and every video that I release, if I say I'm going to show you 10 decks, I always end up showing you 11, 12, 13 decks, it doesn't matter. I'm always cheating. But it's for the good of the cards, because we love the cards and we're here for the cards, aren't we? So, this is the French tarot, Arthurian tarot, so Le Tarot Arthurien, by Claire Duval, and it has been illustrated by my favorite illustrators of all time, Anna Torian. I absolutely love her work so much that everything that she does I immediately buy without even asking myself if I like it or not. And truth be told, so far I haven't been disappointed. She's also the illustrator of a very famous tarot deck which is called the Bonestone and Earthflash, which is an indie deck written by Avalon Cameron, our own Aussie-Australian Avalon Cameron, from Tasmania. I think she lives in Tasmania at least. I don't know whether she was born there. So, newsflash, but you probably know this already, the Bones That Are Now Flash Star, which is currently out of print, very hard to find and incredibly expensive because it used to sell for $444 US a copy, is now being picked up mass market, could possibly be released next year. We're not sure, we don't have a date, but indeed, yes, it has been picked up mass market, which is wonderful news, even though there will be changes on the deck, on the cards themselves, and definitely on the guidebook as well. However, another flash news very recently, Anna has published in her Instagram account that she has finally received a copy, full copy of her Tarot of Echoes, which is based on her Oracle of Echoes. It's an indie deck for now, but she's also released the news that it will be picked up mass market possibly next year. So that was all communications that I really needed to tell you all, because it's something that I really care about. Everything that Anna produces and makes will always have a priority for me. This deck is incredible, I have to say. So Claire Duval reached out to me because she watched the video in which I do the unboxing of this deck, and she was so sweet because when I did the unboxing, I went through the book. Let me show you the book. This is a chunky monkey. I mean, look at this, and it's unbelievable. Not just the production value, you have a full page, you know, full color, and then you have the title, the name of the card, the title. You also have the astrological references, so you have the decan references, then you have the symbols and the meaning of the card, you have some journaling prompts, and then you have a sacred quest. Obviously, because it's referring back to the Arthurian world, so you have the quest. So while I was doing the unboxing, I was looking at the cards, and I was looking at the Six of Swords. And the Six of Swords, if you don't know that about me, is one of my most important cards. Not just because I'm an Aquarius, and the Six of Swords as a decan has Aquarius. I think it's Venus in Aquarius. I'm not entirely sure. Off the top of my head, it's Venus, but it could be something else. Maybe it's the Seven of Swords and it's got Venus in Aquarius. In any case, the Six of Swords is one of my most important cards because it is one of those cards that really tells a lot about a deck. Let me tell you a secret that no one will tell you. When you decide whether to acquire a deck or not, of course you need to look at your preferred cards. Absolutely, go for it. If you love the World cards, if you love the Lovers cards, if you love the Hermit card, the Death card, anything, the Nine of Cups, the Queen of Cups, go for it. My secret is this: look at the Six of Swords. Of course, look at the first cards that you like first, and then look at the Six of Swords. Is it a card that resonates with you? Yes or no? Because if it is, I can assure you anything else will not be as important. The Six of Swords is a card that, because we are human beings, there's no two ways around that. We will find ourselves sooner or later, more than once, alas, more than once, in a Six of Swords situation. The Six of Swords situation is when we have to embark upon a journey that we don't necessarily like. We don't necessarily jump at the opportunity. We're not happy about being in that boat because the waters are choppy. We're alone most of the times, or we are caring for a minor that is defenseless, and so we are their defenses. We have to be a bigger person than what we feel the energy we have for, and therefore moving to something else, moving to something that is necessarily a better shore than the one we're currently in is not always a pleasant journey, but it is a necessary one. If the Six of Swords in a tarot card gives you that sense of moving towards something better, then it's let's say the author, the creator, the illustrator, whomever, have done a good job. There are so many decks in which the Six of Swords it misses the point. So when I was looking at this deck, I was looking and I was talking about the deck, my first impressions, I was talking about the quality, I was talking about, the gilding and the box and the images and the colors, as I do. And at a certain point, I see the Six of Swords and I go, oh. And I know that I may have sounded a bit, not disappointed, but probably a bit perplexed. Now, I'm trying to look for it now, but for Murphy's Law, it's going to be probably the last card on the deck. As a matter of fact, let me just check if it's the last card of the deck, because most of the time it is. If not the last one, maybe one of the last ones, but no, it's not that. Anyway, let's keep on going through this way. So at the same time, I'm going to show you the cards, which are absolutely a joy to look at, because again, it's by Anna Toia. So I was looking at the Six of Swords and I went, ah. And what happened was that at first, it didn't really resonate with me, and I was kind of disappointed. But more than disappointed, I was actually worried, because I love this deck so much. And I thought to myself, if the Six of Swords doesn't work, I may need to change my theory about it. So this is the Six of Swords. And, it's not your typical boat. There's not even water here. There's nothing that is usually representing the Six of Swords. So what I did, because I really didn't want to give up on this, I went to the guidebook. I went to the Six of Swords. Let me see if I can find it quickly. So we got the 5 and we got the 6. So in this case, the title is The Lord of Deserved Success. So it's Mercury in Aquarius, sorry, not Venus in Aquarius, it's Mercury in Aquarius. And then I went through the symbols. So of course we have a book. So the book in here is representing the search for knowledge and truth, communication, the internal voyage or journey. Then the tree is growth and beauty, and then the green, as the green color, is renewal and change. And then when you go to the meaning, so the symbols, I'm okay with that, absolutely. Search for knowledge, yeah, because of course the suit of the sword is the suit of the mind, so of course it's the growing. The number 6 is, it comes after the disruption of the number 5, so it's obviously taking charge of looking at the lessons that we had to learn necessarily in the previous minor arcana. But when I looked at the meaning and I was translating at the same time as I was reading it, I saw that there was a reference to Thoth. So in Thoth, the Six of Swords is referred back to the title Science, because it is the inspiration of the research. And, it really is the what we were talking about before, that it really brings you back to the meaning of the suit of the mind. And so then it goes on to say that the Six of Swords is inviting you to concentrate, to focus on your problematic, and to take your time, so that you can arrive at a conclusion that is actually the fruit of a reflection. It's not just something you come up with. It's not the fruit of impulsive, and it's not an impulsive decision, it's a fruit of reflection. But it's also encouraging you to open up to curiosity and spirit in such a way that they will allow you to grow. And this card is announcing also a voyage, so you do have the element of moving towards something better, or a phase of transition, a favorable transition to your personal growth. It is a good card, and I absolutely love this. I love that it's a reminder that this is a quest. Originally, it was a quest for knowledge. It was a quest to become a better person. As soon as I read that, I immediately loved it, because it's one of those things. It gives you a second layer. It gives you it makes your knowledge grow, and it gives you an additional possibility to read the card, with something else. It's establishing that kind of edge that sometimes you need when you read a special spread, a special tarot deck, when you read about a special situation, even a difficult situation. And I just really loved it, and I am so very grateful to Claire for giving us the possibility to look at the Six of Swords that way. So it was, you know, she was very sweet, because then she saw my reaction on the video and she saw that I changed my mind about it. And I am so very much in love with this deck that it had to be in one of my top 10. And last but not least, by any means, this is my last deck in my top 10 mass market decks for 2023. This is an Oracle deck. It's published by Blue Angel. It's called Maidens of the Wheel Oracle Cards by Tammy Wampler. It journeys through the cycles of the year. Now, this deck, to be honest with you, I went back and forward, but it's such an amazing deck once you get to know it. And the reason why I'm presenting it to you today is because I have felt throughout, let's say, the presentation of this deck in other videos, I've seen it in Instagram, etc. And there's a little bit of hesitance when it comes to appreciating this deck. And I feel sorry for that, because I actually really like it and I really appreciate it. And I think that, again, it's one of those examples in which we should not judge by a book by its cover, because it actually is an incredibly deep deck. It's a really beautiful one as well. And what happens is that this deck will give you a lot of possibilities to do a lot of work, whether it's mostly apt to use in your personal practice, let's put it this way. So whether that is light work or shadow work, it doesn't necessarily matter. But the images have such an intensity, there is such a strong character and personality to the figures represented in the cards, that this is definitely an experience that you will not forget. Using this deck, when you just look at the cards, you look through them, you look at the guidebook, etc. I do understand that it may leave you a little bit perplexed, in the sense that perhaps there is not enough engagement, there's not a lot of bonding happening. But these figures, they literally break the fourth wall and they look at you and they demand your attention. Now, these are, let's say, maidens of the wheels, but in some cases we see here, for example, Pachamama. So it is a span or across a lot of different cultures. Celine, you know, Ninlil, etc. And it is an incredibly interesting take on these characters as well. So there is a little bit in the guidebook, there is a little bit of the explanation of the, for example, Persephone. There's an explanation on the title that is associated with Persephone. There's a little bit of the story about Persephone, what is she, let's say, related to. And also there's a little bit of a practice or the encouragement to use the card in your practice. For example, in this case, if we look about Persephone, it says here, turn now to the west. Ask the maiden Persephone to join you on the wheel. Transitions can be scary, but know you are not alone in this journey. Persephone has traveled this road many times. She knows the way through the darkness better than any other. Grasp her hand and let her guide you down to the dark and still places where your wisdom and strength lie. Persephone appears twice in this oracle as she brings you messages from the 2 seasons of the wheel. I love the fact that there is this kind of, it's explaining the story, but it's also telling you what to do, and it also tells you how to relate to the specific, let's say, character in the card. So having said that, it is a really beautiful production, because Blue Angel, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they have gone back to a very silky but smooth cardstock. So it's not the silky rose petal cardstock that it means that the cards all stick together. This is actually really good and it fans out really well, as you can see. It's a really It's an oracle size deck, so obviously, you know, if you have small hands like mine, it's not the perfect size. But handling it has never been a problem, I noticed. So I really appreciate this deck, and I had the opportunity to use it in many different ways. At the beginning, originally, I actually bought this deck because I wanted to find an oracle deck that would pair up with a recent Kickstarter that I received, which is the Habetrot Treant Tarot. And these two pair up really well together. But then I've actually started admiring the cards and pulling just one card at a time without the tarot deck. And I feel like there is a lot that you can do with these. It's a very interesting deck. As I was saying before, the majority of the characters on the cards are breaking the fourth wall, they're looking directly at you, and there is this kind of request for an engagement. It's also an invitation to join them in their quest, which is really cool. And I just really, really love it. So this is the last deck that I wanted to show you. I love this card. For today's video, which is about my top 10 mass market decks for 2023. But as I said during the video, and probably at the beginning of the video as well, of course, I'm going to show you an additional deck. Now, this deck is a honorable mention. And let's see, I've got it here. So before I show you this deck, it's an honorable mention, and the reason why I did not include it in the top 10 is merely a problem of timing. So this deck is, you ready? Ta-da! It's the Joker Tarot. This deck has been illustrated by probably also one of my favorite illustrators of all time, Corrado Roy. Corrado Roy is an Italian illustrator, and you may know him from the Murder of Crows Tarot, which is also a Lo Scarabeo publication. He also released the Dark Side of Tarot, which is also by Lo Scarabeo, which is pretty much an RWS clone. But he's also very famous. If you're Italian, you will know this. He's one of the most famous illustrators of a comic book, which is, it was born in the 70s, Dylan Dog. Born in the 70s, is still in print to this day, and I kid you not, but there'll be millions of people that love that comic book. They do sell millions of copies. It's a monthly publication. It is one of those things that, I don't know, it's been throughout my childhood, it's been, you know, accompanying me my whole life. Every time that I go back to Italy, I buy as many copies as I can. They sell them at the airport in Venice. I know a place where they actually keep them for me because they know that I love them so much, and they were so kind, incredibly kind to me, that they actually let me have access to their vintage issues from the 80s and early 90s for the same price as a new one. So it was €4.30 or something like that. I did not have to pay more for the older ones, even though they are hard to find and sought after. So I'm so very grateful. And the reason why I love Dylan Dog so much is because Corrado Roy was one of the illustrators. Now, talk about this deck. Now, first of all, I just wanted to show you this book, which is rather big and it doesn't even fit in the image. Anyway, so this is the accompanying guidebook. It is incredibly well written. Not when it comes, let me be clear 100%, because I don't want to be misleading. Not when it comes to the cards, okay? This is not a tarot book. Okay, not a tarot book. Yes, of course, it's a companion book to the tarot deck. Yes, fine. Yes, you have the images on the pages, absolutely. But this is not a book that you will study to learn about tarot. I just want that to be clear 100%. This is a book that is just an amazing reflection on modern times from the eyes, from the lens of the Joker. And it tells you who the Joker is. And the Joker, it even tells you that the Joker is the principle that was born with Aristotle and Socrates and Plato. And it was about noticing that if you're familiar with the myth of the cave, so basically if you live in a cave and all you see in your entire life, and I'm really simplifying, the myth is a lot deeper than that, whatever you see from the outside will be shadows. Okay, you see shadows because you live in a cave, but there is the sun outside and there's people passing about and living their lives and they do their things, and what you see are just shadows. So this is a very important myth. There's a lot more to that, but basically it tells you that what you see is not reality. You're just gaining access of a perspective through a very distorted mask or lens about what truly is out there. So the Joker, the concept of the Joker is that you're supposed to get out of that freaking cave, have the courage to do so, and look at the world for what it truly is. However, since society, the one you come from at least, is inside the cave, you will be seen as the insane one. Because once you see truth and you go back to the cave and you tell the others about what you've seen, they will tell you that you're crazy. So whether you're crazy or you'll be seen as someone funny. Oh, that guy's funny, look at what he's saying. So there is the history of jesters and jokers throughout the centuries, and there's references to films, there's references to philosophy, there's references to books. In this book itself, it's very, very interesting. I've only just started reading it, but I love it. And there is this myth of deception. There is this myth of seeing everything through a lens and not knowing what reality truly is. There's a whole lot of literature about that. If you know a book called Sophie's World by Jostein Gaarder, from probably something like 20 years ago. That was one of the very first time in which this very old ancient philosophical concept has been brought to a book that has been enjoyed by millions of people. But the concept that is explained in this book is incredibly interesting, and I don't know, this is a Kickstarter, so I don't know whether it will be made available or not to the general public. I backed the Kickstarter and therefore that's why I received it. But I wanted to mention this deck in this video because, well, first of all, these are the kinds of videos that are very popular, so they are generally watched by more people. And I just want more people to know about this deck. You may like it or not, it's not about the aesthetics. What I want as a message to be clear is that this is a very incredible and very interesting concept. That the only sane person is the Joker. The only sane person is actually the crazy one. I think that we live in a society that has matured enough that is actually ready to consider that as the truth. We are probably matured and we're probably ready to get out of our comfort zone and get out of that cave and face the world for what it truly is. This is a way of doing it. Tarot for me is a way of literally just taking down that veil and look beyond that and achieve a sense of reality. In many cases it's a blinding light. In many cases it's a deep darkness. It doesn't matter, but it's always something that is enlightening in the sense that it's giving us something to think about, something that gives us pause, something that deserves to be considered. If you want to live a full life, that is. If you're happy with the shadows, it's absolutely fine, because you have the possibility to choose. I love this deck, regardless of what the book talks about, I love it. It is so very typical Corrado Roy. If you know the Murder of Crows tarot, you will recognize the art style. Also, if you're Italian, if you've been reading Dylan Dog, you also recognize the style. And by the way, there is a Dylan Dog deck, and I have two. I have 2 copies of that because I'm such a fan. So this is a very beautiful, very deep deck, kind of on the darker side, as you can see. However, it did not make it to the top 10 simply because I literally just received it. And I spent a couple of hours with it. I loved it. It was love at first sight. Again, not necessarily for the aesthetics, even though of course I do love the aesthetics, but because of the concept that gave birth to this deck. This card is so intense. So that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking it and subscribing if you haven't subscribed as yet. And of course, you can also consider joining my membership. It's a growing family, and I'm so very grateful because, you know, my members are the main reason why I'm here, but also my subscribers. They make it fun for me. They make it so that I actually create this kind of meaningful connections to people in the tarot community, which is the main reason why I'm here. So that's it for now. More to come. Have a great day.